Hi everyone and welcome. Today, we're diving into Chapter 1 of our LAT review, focusing on animal research, its funding, and the critical oversight that keeps everything running smoothly. Origins of biomedical research. Animal and biomedical research dates to ancient times. Early philosophers conducted experiments, and Galen, in antiquity, extensively studied animals like pigs and apes, contributing significantly to the understanding of kidneys and the spinal cord. He also pioneered the comparison of animal and human anatomy, though limited by the prohibition of human dissection at the time. Research stagnated during the Middle Ages, but the Renaissance, 14th to 17th centuries, sparked a renewed interest in science, experimental biology, and medicine. The 19th century witnessed significant advancements. Andreas Vesalius, considered the father of modern anatomy, performed numerous dissections, primarily on dogs. Claude Bernard, a physiologist, emphasized the importance of selecting appropriate animal models based on the specific research question, recognizing anatomical differences between species. Louis Pasteur, a pioneer in microbiology, developed cures for various diseases and parasites. Joseph Lister introduced aseptic techniques, dramatically improving battlefield survival rates by demonstrating the life-saving importance of handwashing. William Morton pioneered anesthesia and analgesia, notably using ether during dental procedures. Diagnostic findings, such as the identification of disease vectors, led to the development of new fields of study. A prominent example is Dr. Walter Reed's team's early 1900s research, which definitively demonstrated that yellow fever is transmitted by a specific mosquito species. This breakthrough paved the way for further biomedical and public health research. Many Nobel Prize winners in medicine have utilized animal models in their research, as highlighted in the AALAS Nobel Prize poster. By the early 20th century, medical teaching hospitals had established dedicated animal research units. The discovery of penicillin in this era spurred a new wave of research focused on antibiotics and other pharmaceuticals. Following World War II, increased federal funding from the National Institutes of Health, NIH, and the National Science Foundation, NSF, significantly transformed the landscape of scientific research in the United States. Since then, scientific methodologies and the use of animals in research have been closely intertwined, contributing to numerous significant biomedical advancements. Technological developments paralleled these scientific strides. The compound microscope, invented in the late 1500s, allowed for the observation of basic cell anatomy. In the mid-1600s, microscopic anatomy became more refined, enabling the study of both large and small organisms, including the observation of blood flow in a translucent fishtail. Other crucial instruments, such as barometers, pumps, scales, and balances, were also developed during this period. Let's talk about the modern research process. Modern research practices differ significantly from those used in earlier eras, such as during Pasteur's time. Today's research process involves a structured approach. A key element is identifying a problem and critically evaluating its implications for research. Quiz question: what is a research study? It is a systematic investigation to establish facts. Scientific research relies on employing reliable and reproducible methods to collect verifiable data, ultimately answering specific scientific questions. Once a research question is defined, an appropriate strategy must be chosen. For example, a question about feline feeding frequency would necessitate a cat model, not a fish model, due to their distinct nutritional requirements. The research process involves formulating an objective framework and establishing a hypothesis, the question being asked and the anticipated answer. A research design is then created, outlining the methods to be used. In the cat feeding example, this would include determining necessary equipment, such as scales and cat food, and establishing baseline data like the cat's weight. Identifying variables that could influence the research design is crucial. For instance, if the cat in the example is allowed outdoors, the possibility of supplemental feeding by neighbors introduces a variable that must be considered. The next steps involve collecting and analyzing data, followed by reporting the findings and conclusions. Scientific progress depends on the dissemination of research results through publication, ensuring that new knowledge is shared and built upon. None of this is free, but where does the funding for biomedical research come from? Biomedical research is expensive, requiring substantial funding. Unlike easily accessible personal loans, securing research funding is a complex process. The primary source of federal funding for biomedical research is the National Institutes of Health, NIH. While some funding comes from nonprofit organizations, the NIH provides the vast majority. Competition for NIH grants is intense, with numerous applications submitted and only a fraction ultimately funded. NIH grants typically cover 3 to 5 years, and even primate centers, like the one being discussed, rely on these grants. Renewal requests are necessary after the initial funding period, and there's no guarantee of approval. Failure to secure continued funding can lead to lab closures. Quiz question: where does most research funding come from? The majority comes from federal sources, primarily the NIH. While NIH is the largest source, other federal entities also contribute. These include the National Science Foundation, NSF, for non-medical research, the Department of Defense, the Department of Veteran Affairs, the Department of Energy, the Department of Agriculture, USDA, and NASA. Quiz question: can anyone else provide funding? Yes, private funding sources also exist. These include nonprofit organizations like the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Society, and the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation. Biotech and pharmaceutical companies may also provide funding, as can direct donations or gifts to universities or foundations. Grant administration. Quiz question: how is the funding handled? Research funds are typically owned by the institution and managed by a central administrative body, such as the Office of Research Affairs. This administrative group not only manages the funds, but also actively seeks additional funding opportunities and assists with coordinating grant applications. Crucially, they also play a role in protecting intellectual property, ensuring that researchers secure patents and take necessary steps to safeguard their research findings. Oversight of an institutional research program. Several key regulations and guidelines govern animal care and use in research. These include the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, the Guide, the Animal Welfare Act, AWA, and its associated Animal Welfare Regulations, AWRs, the Public Health Service, PHS, Policy on Humane Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, the U.S. government principles for the utilization and care of vertebrate animals used in testing, research, and training, the American Veterinary Medical Association, AVMA, Guidelines for the Euthanasia of Animals. The Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, IACUC, is a federally mandated oversight body. Funding agencies often require IACUC approval of a research protocol before releasing funds. IACUC composition. Appointed by the Chief Executive Officer, CEO, of the institution, the IACUC must have at least 3, but typically 5, members. These include a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, DVM, with experience in laboratory animal medicine, a practicing scientist actively involved in conducting animal research, a non-scientist who is naive to the scientific method, a non-affiliated member, someone with no connection to the facility and no prior experience working with laboratory animals. This member represents the general public's interest. IACUC duties. The IACUC's responsibilities include reviewing and approving animal use protocols and any amendments, reviewing and approving institutional policies, standard operating procedures, SOPs, and guidelines related to animal care and use, overseeing animal care and use training programs, conducting post-approval monitoring, PAM, of research projects, reviewing and addressing animal welfare concerns, having the authority to suspend research protocols facing significant issues. IACUC Protocol Review. The primary function of the IACUC is to review animal use protocols. This review ensures compliance with all applicable federal, state, and local laws and regulations, as well as national and institutional policies concerning animal welfare. The IACUC may request modifications or clarifications from the principal investigator before granting approval. IACUC approval duration varies. For non-USDA covered species, approval can be granted for 1 to 3 years. For USDA covered species, approval is limited to 1 year. IACUC must review the animal care and use program every 6 months, as well as inspect the animal facilities. IACUC also reviews proposed animal care and use protocols. What are they considering? The IACUC looks at several key factors. First and foremost, the welfare of the animals. They also need to ensure everything complies with relevant regulations. Another consideration is whether the necessary animal housing facilities are available and if the staff has the training needed for the particular project and species. Finally, they determine if other groups need to weigh in, for example, the Biosafety Committee or the Radiation Safety Committee. Do they have to say yes? No. They can deny the approval. They can also halt a previously approved project if there are significant issues. What does an animal use protocol assessment entail? An animal use protocol assessment is a comprehensive review process designed to ensure the ethical and responsible use of animals in research or teaching. It involves a thorough examination of the proposed procedures and justifications. Here's a breakdown of what such an assessment entails. Justification of animal use. The assessment rigorously evaluates the scientific rationale for using animals at all. It questions the necessity of using this specific species and this particular quantity. Are there alternatives? Is the research question important enough to warrant animal use? Species appropriateness and availability. Is the chosen species the most appropriate model for the research question? Is the species readily available, or are there potential supply issues? Pain management and alternatives. A crucial aspect is the consideration of pain and distress. The assessment explores whether the planned procedures might cause more than momentary pain. If so, what other procedures, including analgesia, anesthesia, or alternative methods, could be employed to minimize suffering? Duplication of research. The assessment checks for potential duplication of existing studies. Is this research already been done? If so, does this project offer significantly new insights? Personnel qualifications. The qualifications and experience of the research team are reviewed. Are the individuals working on the project adequately trained and competent to perform the procedures? Housing and husbandry. The adequacy of the animal housing is evaluated. Are there any special requirements, such as AB cell 3 containment for work with hazardous agents or specific needs for immunocompromised animals? Experimental procedures and anesthesia/analgesia. The assessment details exactly what will happen to the animals during the study. This includes a thorough review of all procedures, the types and dosages of any analgesics or anesthetics used, and how these will minimize pain and distress. Study and humane endpoints. The assessment clarifies the planned study endpoints, the scientific goals of the research, and the humane endpoints, the criteria for removing an animal from the study to prevent unnecessary suffering. Humane endpoints are critical for minimizing distress. Euthanasia and disposal. The methods of euthanasia and carcass disposal are carefully reviewed to ensure they are humane and comply with all regulations. Staff safety. Finally, the assessment considers the safety of the personnel working with the animals. What measures are in place to protect staff from potential hazards, such as zoonotic diseases or exposure to experimental agents? In essence, the animal use protocol assessment is a critical ethical review process that balances the potential scientific benefits of research against the welfare of the animals involved. Institutional policies, SOPs, and guidelines. Effective animal care and use programs rely on a strong foundation of institutional policies, standard operating procedures, SPs, and guidelines. Facilities need all three, and these are often based on federal mandates, national guidelines, and even local laws. Let's start with policies. These are the overarching rules. They must be relevant to animal care and use within the institution and set clear expectations for everyone involved. Next, we have standard operating procedures, or SOPs. These standardize the methods used in animal care and research. They're meticulously reviewed and approved by both the IACUC and the attending veterinarian. Importantly, SPs serve as crucial training documents for staff. Institutional guidelines cover a broad range of areas, including animal husbandry procedures, research methods, and, critically, the assessment of pain and distress. It's essential to remember that any deviations from these guidelines require thorough documentation and prior approval from the AALAC. Program review, facility inspection, and reporting. Maintaining compliance is an ongoing process. The AALAC conducts regular program reviews and facility inspections. The frequency varies slightly, every 6 months to a year. AALA and the USDA require reviews every 6 months, while the guide recommends at least annually. Many institutions find the AALAC program description and the OLAW review checklist helpful tools in this process. What exactly gets assessed during these reviews? Essentially, anything related to animal care and use. This includes animal housing rooms, procedure rooms, and even satellite animal holding areas. Following the review, the AALAC submits a comprehensive report to the institutional official, IO. This report details all deviations from relevant regulations, policies, and guidelines, along with a corrective action plan. The report also classifies deficiencies as either minor or significant, with significant deficiencies posing a threat to the health or safety of the animals. For species covered by the USDA regulations, uncorrected significant deficiencies are also reported to the USDA by the IO. Similarly, if the deficiencies relate to the PHS policy, a report must be submitted to OLAW. This ensures transparency and accountability in animal care and use. AALAC's role in self-regulation. In the United States, the oversight of animal care and use in research relies heavily on a system of self-regulation. Rather than direct government oversight of every project, institutions are responsible for ensuring ethical and compliant research. And at the heart of the system is the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, or AALAC. The AALAC is the institution's mechanism for self-regulation. It's the local body that reviews and approves all animal-related research and teaching activities, ensuring they meet the highest ethical and regulatory standards. While the system is based on self-regulation, there are mechanisms for verification. Agencies like the USDA and OLAW, as well as organizations like AALAS International, can assess and verify AALAC compliance. The AALAC regularly submits reports to these organizations, demonstrating its commitment to best practices. The government also plays a role. While not constantly overseeing every project, agencies conduct random checks and investigate any reported issues of non-compliance. AALAS International provides an additional layer of oversight through its accreditation process. Institutions seeking AALAS accreditation undergo a rigorous assessment every 3 years, demonstrating their commitment to exceeding the minimum regulatory standards. In the event a study is suspended due to noncompliance or animal welfare concerns, the AALAC immediately reports this to the institutional official, IO. The IO, in turn, is responsible for reporting the suspension to the relevant oversight bodies, including the USDA, OLAW, and AALAS International. This transparent reporting system ensures accountability and maintains the integrity of the self-regulation process. Post-approval monitoring. Post-approval monitoring, or PM, is a critical component of responsible animal care and use programs. Its primary goal is simple: to ensure that AALAC-approved procedures are being followed in practice. PM isn't just good practice, it's a requirement. Both the Animal Welfare Regulations, AWR, and the Public Health Service, PHS, policy mandate post-approval monitoring. During PM, several key elements are assessed. This includes the procedures themselves. Are they being performed as approved? The animal use areas. Are they maintained appropriately? And, of course, the animals themselves. Are their health and well-being being monitored as outlined in the protocol? The observations made during PM are always compared back to the approved animal protocols. This ensures that research activities remain aligned with what the AALAC has reviewed and approved. What happens if an issue is identified during PM? Deficiencies, no matter how small, need to be corrected quickly. PM is a collaborative process. Often, retraining of personnel is the most appropriate response, especially for minor deviations. However, if the issue is significant, posing a risk to the animals or staff, more serious action may be necessary. In such cases, the AALAC and the institution will work together to address the situation and prevent future occurrences. PAM is designed to be a continuous improvement process, ensuring the highest standards of animal care and use. Review of concerns. The AALAC plays a crucial role in ensuring animal welfare, and this includes being responsible for reviewing and investigating all reported concerns. These concerns can originate from various sources. They may come from staff members within the institution or even from members of the public. Importantly, concerns can be reported anonymously. This allows individuals to raise issues without fear of reprisal. All staff members must be adequately trained on how to report potential animal welfare issues. They need to know who to contact and the procedures for reporting. There will be absolutely no discrimination against anyone who reports a concern in good faith. And, critically, there will be no retaliation of any kind against individuals who report concerns. The institution is committed to protecting those who speak up for animal welfare. A culture of open communication and transparency is essential for maintaining the highest standards of care. AALAC International Accreditation. The government can't fund everyone. Funding from any source is highly competitive. AALAC, Association for Assessment and Accreditation of Laboratory Animal Care, International Accreditation is a voluntary but crucial assessment program, often vital for securing research funding. Developed by the Animal Care Panel, now AALAS, in the 1960s, AALAC International is a private, non-profit organization. It uses the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals as a framework to conduct peer reviews and evaluate animal care programs at institutions. Many prominent research institutions, including OHSU, the Primate Center, OSU, and likely Providence, Legacy, and the University of Oregon, hold AALAC International Accreditation. These peer reviewers conduct site visits every 3 years, with different reviewers each time, assessing compliance with federal, state, and local laws, regulations, and standards outlined in the Guide and, where applicable, the AG Guide. For international institutions, particularly in Europe, the assessment also considers adherence to regulations like the European Convention for the Protection of Vertebrate Animals used for experimental and other scientific purposes, and directives from the European Parliament and Council. AALAC accreditation significantly enhances an institution's chances of receiving funding. When competing with institutions lacking this accreditation, those with AALAC accreditation are far more likely to be awarded grants. This is because AALAC accreditation demonstrates a commitment to animal care and research practices that exceed basic requirements, signaling a higher standard of quality and responsibility. Now for a quick quiz. These questions are designed to help you see if there's anything you'd like to review again.